The soft breeze of the afternoon carried the scent of fresh leaves and distant salt water, creating a serene atmosphere that wrapped around the village. Golden Heart stood near the edge of the forest, watching as villagers went about their daily routines. His thoughts drifted to Amy, as they often did. Her walls were still up, but every now and then he'd catch a glimpse of the person behind them, a flicker of something more than the guarded, distant demeanor she showed to the world. Today, however, he felt a sense of hope that maybe she would open up a little more. He spotted her walking past the market, heading down a quiet path toward the village outskirts. After a moment of hesitation, he made his way toward her.
Hey, Amy.
He called gently as he caught up to her. Amy paused, glancing over her shoulder. Her usual guarded expression softened slightly when she saw it was him, though the hesitance in her posture was still there.
Hey!
She replied, her voice measured, though not as distant as it had been before.
Mind if I join you?
Golden Heart asked with a hopeful smile, motioning to the path ahead. For a moment, Amy seemed to weigh her options, and Golden Heart braced himself for another polite refusal. But instead, to his surprise, she nodded.
Sure, I guess.
They began walking side by side, the sounds of the village fading into the background as the path led them toward the quiet hills beyond. It was a peaceful stretch of land, dotted with wildflowers and shaded by trees, and Golden Heart was content to let the silence between them linger, not wanting to push Amy into conversation. After a few minutes, it was Amy who spoke first.
You're pretty persistent, you know that?
Golden Heart chuckled softly.
I suppose I am. But I guess I want to understand you. I want to be there for you, if you'll let me.
Amy's steps slowed a little, her gaze drifting to the path ahead.
I'm not used to that. People always have their reasons for sticking around, and it's usually not because they actually care.
Her words hung in the air, tinged with bitterness. Golden Heart's heart ached for her, but he kept his response measured, careful not to overwhelm her.
I'm not here to get anything from you, Amy. I'm just here because I care. No strings attached.
Amy didn't respond immediately, but her expression shifted, just for a moment. It was subtle, but Golden Heart saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the crack in her armor. She was listening, even if she wasn't ready to fully accept it yet. They continued walking, the silence between them now a little more comfortable, though still heavy with unspoken emotions. Golden Heart glanced at her, watching the way her shoulders tensed as if she were carrying a weight too heavy for her to bear.
Is it always this hard for you?
He asked quietly.
Letting people in?
Amy's steps faltered slightly, and for a second Golden Heart thought he had overstepped. But then she sighed, her breath shaky.
Yeah, it is. It's like every time I start to let someone in, something happens and I get hurt all over again. It's easier to keep everyone at a distance. That way, I don't have to deal with the disappointment.
Golden Heart felt a pang of sorrow in his chest. He wanted to say something, anything to ease her pain, but he knew words alone wouldn't be enough. Instead, he walked a little closer to her, his presence a quiet reassurance.
You don't have to trust me completely right now,
He said softly.
but maybe you could trust me a little, just for today.
Amy glanced at him, her expression a mix of doubt and curiosity. For a long moment, she said nothing, her eyes studying him, as if trying to decipher whether he was genuine or just another person waiting to hurt her. Finally, she let out a small, reluctant laugh.
You're different, Golden Heart. I don't know what it is about you, but you make me feel less on guard, I guess.
Golden Heart smiled, a warm, sincere smile that reached his eyes.
I'm glad to hear that. It means more to me than you know.
They continued their walk, and though Amy still kept a certain distance, Golden Heart could feel the shift between them. It wasn't much, but it was a step, one small step towards something deeper, something more real. As they neared the end of the path, Amy stopped and turned to face him. Her eyes were still guarded, but there was a softness there that hadn't been present before.
Thanks for the walk.
She said quietly.
And for not pushing me.
Golden Heart nodded, his voice gentle.
Anytime, Amy. I'll be here whenever you're ready.
She gave him a small nod in return before turning and walking away, her steps a little less heavy than before. Golden Heart watched her go, his heart filled with a quiet hope. It would take time, he knew, but today had been a step in the right direction, and for now, that was enough.